Good morning. How's everyone doing? Welcome to my Twitch stream. This is my first time here, and we're gonna get started now. Looks like there's a couple of people online. Hopefully a few more join us shortly. Today I'll be starting from scratch on a Xamarin Forms plus Blazor app. I'm gonna be working on it kind of for our meetup. So over the next few weeks, I'll be working on what I'll be presenting at our next meetup. And then from then on each month, when someone presents the following week, I'll kind of implement whatever it was they taught us. Welcome, Smartman Apps. Smartman Apps, I do remember meeting you at the Monkey Fest, but I'm sorry I've forgotten your real name, but it was nice to meet you there, and thanks for coming along. And Rod's here too. Hi, Rod. Alrighty, I'm gonna get right in. Donald, that's right. Nice to meet you again. Cool. I'm gonna get right into it now. Nope, that's the wrong screen. Here we go. So I've already created the Git repo and checked it out. Other than that, we're starting right from scratch. And I'm gonna start with a shell forms app. With iOS and Android. No backend. Good morning, Kim. Welcome. Oops, that's... Yep. On maps. Yep. Yep. Yes, put it in that Git repo. And any second now, we should have our solution. And just to check that nothing's gone drastically wrong before I've even started, I'll test that this empty app works on the simulator. And while that happens, I'll do an init commit. Added blank forms app with shell template. Oh, opened up on the wrong screen. Disaster. Here we go. It worked. Just checking, can everyone hear me okay? And can you hear the music? And what's the balance like? Do you want more music, less music, more me, less me? Let me know. Excellent news. Thank you, Kim. Cool. So our blank shell app comes with Android, iOS, and kind of the Xamarin Forms app. The way kind of most of us are probably used to working and how I often work is kind of all my business logic, all my UI, everything like that goes within this one core project. And then Android, iOS, platform specifics only. I'm gonna split it out a bit further and add a core project so that that code can be shared beyond just iOS and Android. It'll also make it more testable. And just, it also enforces me to make sure I do follow strictly those rules of what goes in a view, what goes in a view model, that sort of stuff. And once we've got it working as a Xamarin Forms app, we'll be adding Blazor as well. So we want to be able to share this code. So I'm going to go with a .NET Standard library. I'm going to go .NET Standard 2.0. Forgotten exactly what it is, but there is some kind of project I like to use that isn't 2.1 compliant yet. Hopefully that changes in the near future. So I'll call this Melbourne Modern Apps dot core. And I'm bringing all of the models from that original project over, and all of my view models as well. And then we're going to need a reference from our Forms app to our core app. And right now I'm also going to add James Montemagno's MVVM helpers. Couple of reasons. One of the most important ones, I love the observable range collection, so you don't have to add things one by one. And the other feature it's got is commands built in. So because I've got my view models in my core, which won't have Xamarin Forms in it, I can't use the command implementation from there. So I'm using the MVVM helpers one. So that'll go in there and there. Don't need to put it in Android or iOS because there's no platform specific implementation. That should just flow through.
Remember all the happy times we had.
Now my model all still looks good. My view models, I've got a few. And we're gonna get some errors in here. So the next few minutes are just gonna be fixing errors and realigning namespaces sort of things. So that command, I'm gonna use MVVM helpers. Not sure why this view model has a reference to a view, but I'm getting rid of it. Because it's subscribing to something from Messaging Center. I'm not going to use Messaging Center in this app. I'll build it a little bit differently. Maybe at some point we'll add some messaging, but initially I'll just have it refresh each time it reappears. Up that font. Sorry about that. Thank you, Kim. How's that looking? Probably a touch far. There we go. Is that solution font and body text font all good now? Xamarin Forms is not going here anymore. That's the other thing. My services I am also moving up to my core. Now this mock data store that it comes with provides you with a few items and a few add, update, delete. We'll probably gradually replace this whole thing, but for now we're sticking with it. I'm going to move that namespace to match the folder structure. So I'm using .core.services. The iData store is going to have to move as well. Item is in the wrong namespace. That no longer exists. So I'm just doing lots of Alt-Enter, find the missing using. Get rid of that. Now we're using dependency service here, which is part of Xamarin Forms. That's not going to work. At some point I'll replace it probably with either the ASP.NET Core dependency injection, because that's probably becoming to Xamarin Forms soon. For now, I'm just going to new it up, which I know is going to come back to bite me later, but this will work for now. New mock data store. So either the .NET Core one or maybe dry AOC. See how I feel when I get to it. Models moved. Let's see how we're going. Does this project build yet? No, it doesn't. Get rid of that. I also don't have Xamarin Essentials in here. So for now, I'm just going to comment out that browser open async. later on I will work out some kind of abstraction. David asks, by .NET Core you mean Microsoft.extensions.dependency-injection? Yes, I do. So I think that's the one. It's not strictly speaking .NET Core, but it is the one that comes by default in .NET Core. So if that is that same one, then yes. And when we add the Blazor project shortly, we will see that it has that dependency injection engine all wired up already. So it'll be nice to take advantage of that one already being there and reuse a lot of the code. Cool, my core project builds. My forms project probably doesn't quite yet. So let's start with the items page. It's gonna have a reference to the view model, but it looks like they wire it up in the code behind here. That's gone. Item removed. I go back and forth on naming this other project as .core because it's not .NET Core, it's just the core of my app. Has that found that correctly? Yes, it has, but that's still in the wrong namespace. Which means I will have just brought back an error. What's my next error to fix? My base view model. Is in the wrong namespace still. Now we can't find the base view model, so just need to add, let's fix that namespace. That's fine. Fix this namespace. Core still builds. That namespace no longer exists. Item detail view model. Something a bit fishy going on here. What's our error? Cannot convert an item detail view model to an item detail view model. If we look at item detail pages constructor, it's probably missing a using directive. Yes, it is. And it's got missing model as well. Here we are in the new item page. That also needs an item. That's not a real namespace. Mock data store. Where are we? That has moved to core services. Let's add a namespace VM equals, and this should find it for me. That just tried to do a hot reload. Not sure what it would really expect to happen. I have just moved the view model, but that view model doesn't exist yet. But anytime I make a change and save in my XAML, that'll hot reload, which doesn't make a lot of sense right there. Okay, that's successfully built. Let's run it and see what we've broken. move my face over a bit. I've realized I was hiding the wrong part of the screen and showing the wrong part of the screen. Failed to resolve iOS. Couldn't find that .core. Let's see if it finds it now. Cool, we've got a list of items there. We can add an item with a description. Now there's something still a little bit wrong with how it's adding and finding new items, but I'm just going to ignore that for now and fix it later. We can get to the edit page. Oh no, it's not edit, it's just details. Those are just labels. We can get to the about page, and we're expecting that button does nothing. Cool, so we've got everything wired up there. Now, I'm gonna add a few fields and add an image to this. So what we're aiming to get out of this app is one for our meetup, which Rod and Kim, who are both in the app, organize with me. I'm gonna have a list of presenters on this screen, and then we'll have another screen that is a list of presentations, and we'll kind of build it out from there. So let's start by get rid of a few of these unnecessary tabs. ID can change. I'm gonna change text to be name. I'll leave description there, and also have a string for image URL. Now if we go to our view for the items page, I'm going to clean this up a little bit. All this D:" stuff is for using the previewer, which I used to really like using, but now we've got hot reload, I barely touch it. So I'm going to clean up a bit of that code that isn't needed. Here we've got data template for our lovely new collection view. Instead of a stack layout, I'm going to put a frame around everything. And then, yes, it's got a matching frame, can only have one child. So we need to then put a grid inside that. Control-I, align my text and format it up all nicely. It's no longer a stack layout with the gesture recognizer, it's a grid. So I'm going to go kind of a card layout here, and I found one on Dribble that I'm going to kind of loosely base it on. So car auction, car quotes repair app they've designed here. Not implementing the full UI, just I like to kind of look at these cards, and kind of the spacing there, so I'm kind of going to go for a bit of that. And also, but I'm going to go for a round face rather than a square car. So looking at that grid, we're going to have columns and row definitions. And using my M fractor, I'm going to insert row and column definitions. We're going to have 2 rows. And also 2 columns. I'll make the rows one with a height of auto, and that'll be where the presenter's name will go, and then star to fill up the rest with the description. Columns, I'm going to go with a fixed width of, let's say, 120, and then all the text area can fill up the rest. Okay, it's looking like an absolute mess so far. That's good. This label, I've changed the text on it to name. Now let's add a frame with an image inside it. Source is going to be from my view model the image URL. And then I'm going to give that a row span of 2. I'm going to give this image a width request of 120, a height request also of 120, and then I can give my frame a radius, corner radius of 60. That should give us a circle. And I'll move the name into column 1. Description, also column 1, and into row 1. Starting to kind of take shape. Those circles aren't quite circles. I think that's because I've got one of my rows as being 120 tall, and then there's some extra room as well. We'll come back and fix that up shortly, but first let's get a proper image there and some names and descriptions. So if I go to the mock data store, these items need a bit of updating. So I'm kind of using this item as a presenter model. I'll rename it at some point, but for now, I'm just going to leave it as it is so I don't have to rename 100 things. Let's do the new multi-cursor, Alt, Shift, dot, 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 dot. All those texts will be multi-cursor. Name. Oops. And escape. Bling Blong says vertical options equals start for my frame, so it doesn't fill up that room. Let's give that a go. Still not quite right, I think. Let's see, so we've said, maybe I need to put those. I think you're on the right track. That for Kim's saying with request on the frame, not the image. Got it on both now when it's still being strange. If I do Kim's thing of just the frame. No, is it? What if I make that an auto? Well, now it's symmetrical, but my corner radius is all wrong. I think I've got some padding, which is meaning that the 120 isn't actually its real size. Something a little fishy there. I think that's a bit bigger than I actually want. What if I make them just 100? So this frame's padding isn't going to be having an impact because it's further out. I'm just going to reset some paddings and margins to 0 so we know exactly what's going on. There we go. So it was because my frame had padding on it that those numbers weren't adding up. That's a bit more like the size image I want. At some point I'm going to add in the material components so that we can get a frame with a slightly nicer shadow. That one's a bit extreme, but at the moment... Let's see, did my forms project, do they have material visual in by default at the moment? Nougat. No, they don't. So we'll have to add that ourselves later, which I can do. Yeah, let's do that now. I'm clicking Manage Nougat right up at the solution level, which is a fairly new feature to VS Mac. We can install Nougats everywhere at once instead of doing them all one by one, which is really nice when you need to upgrade forms and your Android support libraries and you have to go through 6 different projects or something like that. It gets pretty horrible. There we go. Xamarin Forms visual material. Yes. Ooh, just quickly, let's check which version of forms we're using in. I'm going to use the latest and greatest bits here and take this up to latest preview as well, and Xamarin Essentials also up to latest preview. Oh no, that's actually the latest stable, both are the same. Interestingly, in this current template, they've got Xamarin Essentials 1.3, which is based on Android support libraries, but it came with Xamarin Forms 4.5, which is based on Android X, which means it's pretty impressive how well everything just seems to still work even with those different dependency chains and all the weird type forwarding they've got going on. But that was working. Updating Nougats live on stream is probably a bit risky. I've got Slack notifications coming through. I need to get rid of them somehow. Cool, that's added those two. Now I can add the material nougat that I actually came looking for. Add package to my Forms app, my Android, my iOS. If you're ever using the visual material, make sure you've got the exact same version of that as you do for your Xamarin Forms, or weird things can happen. One more nougat down just in the iOS is the material components. On the Android, it's based on stuff that's built in, but in iOS, it's this Xamarin iOS material components where the actual renders are underneath, which is Xamarin have wrapped the Google library, which Google brought material to iOS and then Xamarin wrapped it so that we can have that material visual. Then in our app delegate, just before forms init, there we go, Xamarin dot forms dot forms material dot init. Yes. Now on those frames, I say visual equals material. I'll put it on that one as well. In general, you can just put your visual equals material either once per page or even on your app shell or go down through the whole app, although it doesn't make it into the data templates on collection views at the moment. So that'll be something they're fixing soon, I expect. We also had to fix that. Title equals name. That's right, I got a little bit distracted when I was fixing up my models. So let's... how are we on building? Name. Builds, that's on our device. Cool, we've got both our texts, no images yet, and we can now see a much more gentle drop shadow on those frames. Now we're in our mock data store. Let's get some real presenters. Let's have Kim Philpotts. He's a regular presenter we've got. Rod Hemphill. And me. Yeah, as Kim said, brutal drop shadows. Who else? We got Michael Whitehead. He did our presentation last month. Ryan Davis. Don't think he's in the chat room. Hopefully he'll pop in later. He spends a lot of time on Twitch. And let's say Matthew Robbins. We had him recently as well. For the images, I'm just going to go straight to their Twitters. Let's start with Rod. Rod Hemphill is on Twitter, even though you don't see him there much. I'm just going to take that URL. Image URL equals the Twitter one. And let's get Kim as well. With an image URL for Kim. And see if that works. We can add the rest of the faces later. Cool, we've got two faces there. Next thing I want to do is these list view items are all right up next to each other. I want to turn into a bit more of a card view, which is why we've lined up those frames. We just need to put a bit of spacing and stuff in. So on my collection view, instead of using the default layout that they give you, I'm going to change it to a linear layout. So on a collection view, by default, it goes off a vertical linear items layout. The other option you've got is grid. For a phone in portrait mode, grid isn't a lot of use, so let's stick with a linear. But if you want to change any of the settings on it, you can't just do things like what you used to do in the list view, which is spacing here. That's all kind of been abstracted out into a few different pieces. So for our linear items layout, we can go item spacing. Let's see what 20 looks like. Probably won't look like much. Have to give it an orientation before it can do anything. We'll stick with vertical. Cool, we've got some spacing there, but with the card and that page having the same background color, doesn't really show it off yet. So I've brought that layout we were looking at before from Dribble into XD, and I'm no expert on XD. If you want any help with this, talk to Kim, but I do know how to find colors, I think. So that's going to be my background color for my whole page. And I'm going to extract that into a style. Move color to an Xamarin resource. Yes, good. Page background. So that's using the mFractor extension. You can kind of find any of them, move it over to your Xamarin. Is it there? No, it's not. I have to tell Matthew about that one. I think it is there, but it's one of those things where VS Mac can get a bit confused about open files being updated. If we take a quick look at our source tree, app.xaml, it's got it there. VS Mac's just struggling to keep up. So I reckon after a build, it will still work. There we go. You can see a bit of spacing and a different background color behind that now. And I also want to bring a bit of padding in from the edges, but I think the spacing's about right. And let's get a bit of a corner radius as well. So on that collection view, I'm gonna add a margin on this. See what 10 looks like. Yep, that's looking about right. So doing this, I've actually made the whole collection view smaller, which we can see with that. It is all 10 pixels in on the page. I've gone for margin rather than doing a padding, which would just bring the content in, because doing a margin calculation is a lot quicker for Xamarin Forms, and if you've got too many calculations that are complicated with padding all going on at once, it tends to get a bit confused. So margin's going to be safer. Cool, that's pretty much all I want out of my list for you there. Let's commit that. Branch. Stream 1 features. I've moved all models and services into .core project. Created card layout. Cool. So that's kind of as far as I wanted to get with the Xamarin Forms to get started, just so that we can kind of see kind of the form of the app. Next thing I'm going to do is add in the Blazor project. And start connecting it to some of the same things. So I'm going to stop that running. And as of about a week ago, if you're on the preview VS Mac, we've got the terminal built in here. We're going to say .NET new Blazor WASM. Just gonna quickly show you on the getting started with ASP.NET Core Blazor. If you want to do client side, so if you're doing server side, you can make a file new Blazor server app in VS Mac, but we haven't got the templates for client side yet, so you need to go over to the .NET Core CLI. Make sure you get the WebAssembly components with that .NET new. I've already done that. And then to create a new one, we take this command here. .NET new Blazor WASM and give it the flag of the name we want to give it, which will be Melbourne Modern Apps .Blazor WASM. Calling it Blazor WASM because at some point we'll probably also add a Blazor server project to this solution, but for now it'll just be the one. Cool, that's added it and restored. And let's see if it works. .NET. No. We've got the project in there, but it's not in our solution yet. Let's check if it works. Modern apps. With a .NET run. Cool, says we're running on port 5000 and port 5001. Cool, so this is just the file new blank Blazor. They give you a home page, a counter page, and fetch data, which kind of gives you a dummy API with some weather data in it. That's all working nicely. Control C, I'll stop that running. And now we'll add this Blazor project into our solution. Add existing project. Blazor WASM CS Proj. Cool, we've got it in our solution now, so we can open up any of the files. Just a quick look at the file structure of this project. We've got a few pages. Nothing too important there. Shared, you've kind of got the nav layout and that sort of stuff. So that's where you put any shared components you want to share between the two. www root is where you're going to put your CSS and any kind of resources. And in the fetch data.razor page we'll take a look at. So here they've kind of got all their Blazor layout, and then they've got their code in the one file. Some people like to put the code behind in a fetch data.razor.cs, but for this sample we've got here, they just use all in one file. That on initialized async, kind of think of that as the on appearing from Xamarin Forms. And here they're just going straight to an HTTP client call. And with that URL, that's just pointing at one of the local built-in files. But that is just an HTTP client from .NET, so you can call any URL you like there. Get JSON async is kind of a helper method that you don't usually see in the HTTP client that I've seen elsewhere, but they've added it as part of either .NET Core or Blazor, and that will do the get async and a JSON deserialize straight into that array of forecasts. But we're going to throw all that in the bin anyway. So I'm going to turn this fetch data page into our items page. So that model's no longer needed. In our core project, we have the items view model that knows how to load items and that sort of stuff. So I'm just going to add one of them in here. Private items view model VM equals new items view model. At some point we'll wire up DI, but for today we're just newing everything up. That's saying I don't know what one of them is. In Blazor, on this page, we can put a using up here, or if we think it's something we're going to be using in pretty much all of our pages, we can kind of have a bulk imports. So within our Blazor project, there's an underscore imports.razor. It's got a few in there already. That using Melbourne apps. We haven't got a reference yet. Dependencies. Add a reference to our core project. I think I might need to do a build before it'll pick it up. We've got an error. Yeah, that makes sense. I've just seen I've got some of my namespaces as Melbourne Modern App and some of them as Model on Apps. I named that project wrong. Oh well, we'll work for it for now. There shouldn't be anything in kind of overlapping namespace between the two assemblies anyway, so we should be fine. View models. I've seen in this file, you'll often see that your previous using gets an error message when you're adding a new one. It's nothing to worry about, it seems. Forecasts no longer exists. That's correct. Let's inside this on initialize async do our VM dot load items command dot execute. That needs a parameter, but actually rather than executing the command, what I'm going to do when we look at the load items command, it's just runs this method here. I'm going to make that public and call it directly. That's kind of undoing some of the coupling of using commands, but I'm not too fussed. Now we can just do vm.execute load items command, and that's an async, so we'll do an await. Now, in our Razor syntax page up here, we've got a title, a little bit of text, and then we've got an if check, if forecasts equals null, show loading, else show the table of results. So it's kind of a mix of HTML, and then you can just write CSS kind of wherever you feel like it by adding an at. So we're going to change that to if VM dot items is null, because that's now our source. It'll show loading. I'm actually going to chuck in another check there as well for if VM dot items dot count equals 0. We could change it around so that a count equals 0 is actually found no items, and put kind of another view in there. But I'm just going to say if it's either of them, show loading. Now in here, instead of having date, temperatures, and summary, I'm going to have a picture. A name. blurb. So just 3 columns to start with. And instead of at forecast, so instead of in forecast, we're going to say vm.items. Let's say presenter. So here, this is just ordinary HTML with a table row with table cells in it, the TD, and then as soon as I press at, I can just start writing C# and refer to any of the objects or any of the properties within this class or whatever variables you can usually answer. So we're basically working in a C# for each loop at the moment. So we can go presenter dot name. What happened there? Dot name. Presenter dot description. And just for a first pass before we try to do every run before we can walk, I'll just put the URL there as text, and then we'll come back and turn it into a picture in a sec. That looks like it should work. So when we load this page, it will load the items. And then once those items are loaded, hopefully this should update and it'll stop being null, and instead we'll have a table with our data in it. In my drop-down list here, it does show my WASM, but when I play it, it'll give an error. Blaze saying, no, that's a different error. That was just failed to build. I missed a dot. End up with a dot there. Something weird going on with my autocompletes. Let's do a quick Command K, try to build the project. Specified cast is not valid. I think I'm in some kind of weird delete bin obj restart kind of situation here. From when I added the project and then added references. If I now close solution, reopen it, do a restore packages and the whole solution. And now if I try, and I'll build core, that should be very quick. Build Blazor WASM. Doesn't run there, but let's see if I can do it from terminal. WASM Blazor is still in preview, and so not all of the tooling is in VS Mac yet, and there are still a few issues around it, but by the time it goes stable, VS Mac should have good support. Looks like that's run. If I do a refresh here, here we go. We've got our presenter names, some very boring descriptions, and our URLs. Anyone got any questions about what we've looked at so far? Let me know in the chat if anyone wants to look more at any of what I'm looking at as we go along, or any questions about it. Cool. Let's see how well this squishes into there so I can see both at the same time. Fairly nice responsive layout. Any second now it snaps into having the title at the top, but that image URL doesn't squash very well. So now we just write HTML and give it a source. That same at presenter dot image URL. Still put it inside a TD table cell. That should be enough to show it, but it'll probably be a huge square. So I'm gonna give it a width, let's say 100. A height of also, let's say 100. Oh, you have to give them units in CSS. And a radius, might be what it's called, of 50. I might need to go look up some of my CSS here because that might not be quite right. I'm getting green squiggles. Let's see, Duncan says, does it work if your UI is in C# or does it have to be in XAML? So the UI I've got here is in what they call Razor syntax, which they've been using in a few different .NET things for quite a few years now, starting with the MVC back in .NET Framework 3 or 4. So it kind of looks a lot like HTML, but then just whenever you feel like it, you can start writing C# instead. And then there are some components that are Blazor specific. So I think everything we've got in there so far is just plain old HTML or C#, but there are some things, like they've got certain inputs that are kind of designed as kind of shortcuts to give you, just write some quick Blazor and they'll give you the HTML. It all renders out to HTML anyway. So no XAML going on here. This is all fairly close to HTML and it will render down to HTML. There is an interesting new thing going on kind of as a collaboration between the Blazor team and the Forms team called Blazor Mobile Bindings. And that lets you write this same syntax but in a Xamarin Forms mobile app. And then no more XAML. Instead, you're using this kind of syntax, but instead of using your HTML table, H1, whatever, and divs and stuff, you're going to be using stack layouts, grids, labels, all that stuff that we're used to, all the normal controls from Xamarin Forms. There we go. We've got our image in now as well, but they're pretty square. Let's see what's wrong with my radius. Anyone here good at web stuff know what the correct way to define a radius is? So Duncan's actually asked, sorry, Donald is actually asking about our original Forms project. Yep, so if we look at back here, my items page, .xaml. I've done that all in XAML. This project here, my Melbourne Modern Apps project, is referenced by the iOS and the Androids project, and it references my core. But this code in this project here has nothing to do with Blazor. Anything I write in this project is purely for mobile, which means I can write it just the same as I would any other mobile project. And because the code in here is not reusable, it's half reusable. It works for iOS and Android, and also any other Xamarin Forms target, but it doesn't get shared with Blazor. So we want to keep as little of our business logic in here, and also, not just business logic, kind of as much as possible, any code we want to write in here. So that's where I've got my models, my data services, and my view models. So then when I get to my Blazor page, I've just said, give me an items view model, which is in that shared code. So this is all the code that I wrote, or most of it came from the template really, but this is all the code that is reusable. And then in my XAML and my XAML CS for my mobile project, the items page also just gets its own view model, and that's all the code in there that's reusable. So yes, in the mobile app, write it however you like. You could also write all your views just in straight Xamarin iOS and straight Xamarin Android and skip this Forms app altogether and just put your reusable models and view models in there, or any other UI framework or server-side or anything that runs .NET. You can share this code from our core project. Cool. I'm gonna find out CSS radius, border dash radius. Border dash radius. Interested that the width of 100 pixels is not a valid attribute. I'm not sure if that's something wrong there or whether I don't know whether it's just the kind of IntelliSense engine finding the wrong errors or whether I've actually done something wrong but that I've got away with it. Looks fine. Cool. So if we do a refresh here, still not working. Did I do a stop and start? What is it? Control? No. It's meant to be a way to say force refresh, and I swear they change how you get there every new version of Chrome. I can't find it. Okay, I'm going to take a quick look at what our actual code is here. So we can see that the HTML that the browser is rendering is all just plain HTML, but it maps fairly closely to what our raised syntax is. So once we get into our body, so all that sidebar stuff is in those shared nav components and stuff. And then this is where our real content starts. We've got a table with a body, with a row, with an image that says border radius equals 50px. So that's loaded in, but it's not rendering properly. What if we put it CSS image circle? How to create rounded images. Let's see if it's happier if we use a % instead. And rather than recompiling, just one of these. We can just edit the DOM right here. Not sure what's going on. I'm going to come back to that later. But what I will do now, given that I'm planning on using this image in other places in the app as well, I'm going to bring that out into a CSS file. Something I haven't tried yet, but that would be interesting, is sharing a CSS file between my Blazor web and my Xamarin Forms app, given that Xamarin Forms can use CSS. but that no one really does it. So that could be a good use for that. So if we just add in a new class to our CSS, let's say dot circle image, and we'll say a width of 500 px, a height 100 px, and a border radius of 50%. And I think now if we, on our Razor page, instead of doing all that inline styles, which is dirty, go for a class equals circle image. There we go. Don't know why it didn't work with inline styles, but now that I moved it to CSS, that's all working. We've got nice circles. Now that we've got our list page working, what are we missing from the app? We bring them up side by side. So we've got all the same data in there. We've got slightly different layouts, which is fine. We're not trying to create one-to-one UI mapping. We're just kind of going for shared features and as much shared code behind it as possible. So on a mobile app, this kind of card layout is quite nice. It's quite a small screen. It only makes sense to have it like that. Whereas on a web browser, which is potentially quite large, this kind of table view feels a bit more native, if you can say that about a website. So I'm happy with those differences. They cover all the same things, but in our mobile app, we've got the add button, which takes us to this page, which has an entry field to give it a name and an editor to give it the blurb content. That editor is invisible, but we did set a background color on here. So if we put that same background color on our other pages, that might fix that up at the same time. So that's I'll just do a quick fix to that UI in the mobile, and then we'll also add the page to the web. Now, if we say background color, equals a static resource of page background. Spelled background wrong. And then while we're here, instead of having to just put that explicitly on every page, I'm going to take it out into a style. Extract XAML style. There's another mfractor helper. By not giving it a name, that makes it implicit, which means it'll go onto all content pages by default. For a content page, put it in app.xaml so they can all share it. I don't want the title shared between all pages, I just want the background color. And then later on I might add some more things to this style. Maybe if I've got some default paddings or something like that. So that one's now fixed, I believe. Let's give it a run. How are we going in the chat room? Anyone got any cool projects on the go at the moment? Ooh, XAML parse exception, static resource not found for key. I'm just gonna work out what's going on with my weird app.xaml not being readable. Gonna close the solution. Yes, save that page. Take a look at my app.xaml in VS Code. So we've got content, that's not on that screen. We've got our content page with a background color, but now this color was defined after the style that uses it, and in XAML you always have to have them kind of defined in order. I'm going to copy and paste all of that just in case when I open it up in Visual Studio again it's still not playing nice. XAML, still not showing it. If I add in something here, even though that's bad XAML, I think in my source tree, they now match even though a bunch of my code's gone missing. If I now paste it all in and hit save again, they're back in sync and our code should work. Works. Our background's there. We've got that style, but our content page didn't pick up the implicit style. Maybe you're not allowed to do that on pages. Maybe that only works on views. Anyway, if we add in a static resource of page background, thank you IntelliSense, and hot reload. Cool. Now we can see that editor, which is pretty darn small. It's just in a stack layout. So I'm just going to give it a height request of 200 to make it clear to the user you can type more than one line. Now we need a Blazor new item page and an add button, maybe somewhere around there. So in my pages, add a new file. From .NET Core, I'm going to choose a Razor page called new item page. By default, it's been given the .cshtml extension. .razor files are actually in the language CSHTML, but for some reason in modern Blazor times we like to give them the .razor extension instead. But now our editors got confused and said, is this a CSHTML or a Razor? Which is why it's giving us that error. I'm going to close that and open it again, and it's a bit happier. I'm gonna have my two pages side by side just so I can steal a few things. So let's give it a root so that we know how to get here. Let's say it is slash people slash presenters slash new is how we get here. This page has the HTTP client in it, but we're not using that anymore, so I can get rid of that. give it a heading with an H1, a new presenter, and I'm gonna take a quick look at the Blazor docs for exactly how to do a form here. Blazor form. So I could just write an HTML form in there using all the things we're used to, but if you use the edit form that Blazor has, it gives you a few helpers. So they've got the validation built in, and then when we say what kind of text input we're using, instead of doing an input with the type text in Blazor, the done thing seems to be to use this input text that they've made. If we scroll down a bit, they'll tell us that an input text will render as an HTML input, input text area, input select is a select, and so on. So they've kind of got the convention of everything starts with input. I'm not going to use that validation yet. Maybe we'll learn how to use that later. And the model for one of these we don't have yet. So let's give this a view model. That's another difference. In Blazor, the done thing is to say at code. You may see some documentation out there that says at functions. That's what they were calling it in the early previews. But at code is the done way to just write ordinary C# for basically your code behind. If I was doing Blazor with a lot of code in that block, I would put it in the separate .razor.cs behind it. But given that I'm planning on doing basically the same as I did over here and only having maybe 5 lines of C#, I'm just going to leave it in here because all of my code is in that shared view model. Private. What's our view model called again? Looks like maybe the item detail view model is shared for both the item detail page and the new item page. Let's quickly confirm that by looking at that new item code behind. Right. In our forms project, they just use the page as the binding context. That's not very MVVM, and it means that I can't reuse any of this code or any of my validation or stuff in the two projects. If we look at the item detail view model though, we'll probably see that quite a bit of that could actually be used as the same view model for creating and editing. And in fact, we'll probably make it so that it's just the one page to view details and to create a new one. So maybe rather than having a new item page, I'm just going to call it an item detail page. And then later on, I'm going to redo the mobile app so it's also just one page. So let's say item detail page .razor can have an item detail view model called VM. For now, I'll new it up. DI later. Now we're saying we're starting off just doing a new item rather than editing the details. So here, this constructor is expecting that there might be an item passed in, or there might not. But on our view model, we've got a title and we've got an item. So that you can edit these items without saving them, so that you have to save or you can cancel, I'm gonna put the properties on there and then put them in the model when I save it. If you were doing everything over web, this wouldn't matter as much, but because I've kind of just got a dumb data store with everything in memory, as soon as you edit an item, it will be saved, whether you save it or not. So I'll just add a few of these items to my view model. Public string description. Public string image URL. And then as part of my constructor, I'm gonna say if item equals null, else, so only set it if we need to, and we'll then say name equals item.name, description equals item.description, image URL equals item.image URL. And later on, we're going to have a save function. Called save. Using system threading tasks. We'll put some validation logic in here later. Cool. If I'm not actually putting anything in there, let's change that to a not null. And that might as well move in there, and we've already done the null check. But let's say that the title will be new item if it is null. Not new item, new presenter. Cool. Now, in our item detail page razor, we've got a view model. I'm going to put the model for the whole form just to be VM. And then this input text, give it an ID of name, give it a bind value of at VM dot name. Give it a description. Image URL, and rather than doing an onValid submit, just going to do an onSubmit, and we'll do submit, which doesn't exist yet. But we'll add it soon. Let's see if we can just do a public void submit. Now we could call a command in the view model, but at the moment our navigation is all page to page, which is why I'm going to handle it within this page, but the logic will happen in the view model. So I'm going to say await vm.save. And if it's saved successfully, we'll navigate. We need to make this an async task. I think that's okay with having a task. Yes, it is. And then for us to navigate, we need to get a navigation manager, which we get by injecting. That I will call navigation manager. So this at inject is saying to the DI that we're using, give me the navigation manager. If we look in our Blazor, in our program.cs, here our services, all we've given it is a base address HTTP client. This is where you would add other things to your DI later. So you might say services.add. This is probably where we add that iData store with a mock data store or whatever. By default, that services collection has a bunch of things in it already. One of them is an HTTP client. Another is the navigation manager, which is how we can navigate between pages. So now we'll say navigation manager dot navigate to, and we need to give it a URL. We're going to go back to our list of items, which is currently called the fetch data page. Here it is over there. That's our URL up the top. So if it saves successfully, that should pop back to the previous page. So we haven't implemented all of the details of that save yet, but let's check if it runs. Where's my terminal gone? Ads. Terminal. It disappeared because I was in debug view because I'm still running the iOS project. Let's see what we've broken. Cool, there's one warning. That yellow on white is horrible, but it's saying there's an async without an await in it, which will be my vm.save. It will have an await in it soon. Promise. So we don't have a button to get to it yet, but I think we'll just be able to go to this URL and get straight to the page. There we go. So pretty ugly so far. We've just got 3 forms and a submit button that takes us back. Pretty ugly, but it's all we've written so far, so we need to do some more to get it a bit more usable. Let's add in, let's see, so we've got our heading. Change that to presenters. Meetup. Now, should the add button be there if it hasn't loaded yet? I don't think so. Let's make it only if it's loaded. Add in a button. Do something like on click equals add presenter. I'll add a listener here. Let's just say public task. Open presenter. Once again, we need a navigation manager. I'll just steal from here with that inject. Navigation manager dot navigate to. Presenters / new. Button's going to need some text. Add presenter. Give it another run. Can I make my terminal text bigger too? No, I don't think I can without scaling the whole screen. That's running. Give it a refresh. We've got an add presenter button. Very ugly. Oh, something not right. No errors. But nothing happens. Wrong click calls add presenter. Add a presenter. Open presenter. Give it another run. Still nothing. Wonder if there's anything in the console. Debugging's still a little rough in Blazor WASM, although we are very close to having WebAssembly code running debugging in the browser. In Visual Studio. Add presenter not defined. It is. What if I make that a void? Will it be happier? What was that green squiggle we were getting? Oh, just wax away. That's alright. Give it another run. Add presenter is not defined at HTML button dot on click. What if we use some other event on that button? On submit is the one we used in the other one. Oh no, but we put that right up at that level. Let's see if that works. So I am still quite new to Blazor. Xamarin Forms is where I've done most of my dev work. So I am learning as I go on this stream. Still building. Still not running at all. How do we do a button in Blazor? We need to say at on click, I think. Because if you just say on click, think that's purely in the DOM, and then it'll be looking for some kind of JavaScript method, which doesn't exist. But if we add the @ it makes Blazor look for the correct C# method. Cool. That takes us to our page. That takes us back. So we've got navigation working, and we've got our item detail page. That sounds like a good enough chunk to do a commit. We did quite a bit. That's got all the new Blazor stuff. So added a Blazor WASM project. Updated fetch data page to use the shared items view model and mock data store. Added presenter image. Added the details page. Cool, so that's all working. I don't think we changed anything in our core, but let's just make sure if we run it on iOS, we haven't broken anything. It's all still working. Navigation still works. Add that. Still works. So far everything we've done has either been iOS running in the simulator or the Blazor stuff in the web browser. Let's take a look and make sure our Android project works. I'm running this on physical device, a Samsung tablet, which I'll mirror with Visor. Once that's compiled, that'll run there. So, kind of got the basics down of the app so far. We've got the Forms project, and we've got the Blazor page sharing the code and some basic navigation going. We'll keep going for a bit longer. Anyone in the chat room have a preference of what we do next? Do we want to keep on fleshing out the Blazor and making sure it's got all the same navigation, or add a few more pages into the mobile app and get that a bit closer? Whichever you prefer, we can go with. Otherwise, I'll just keep going. We've got a problem in our Android not showing our images. I know why that is. The Wi-Fi's off. And those images aren't in the app, they're just URLs. About page. Back to browse. There we go, Kim and Rod. Cool, I reckon what I'll do next is just within the mobile app, get those. At the moment we've got an item detail page. Cool. Donald's requested more Blazor because he knows his way around mobile. Sounds good. Let's get it so that when we... Alright, so far we've got 3 form fields here. That's not very informative. So let's at least get some labels on them, so we know which one's which. Go with reckon if I go a div with that input text in it, and if I put a P, not a label, that's the Xamarin Forms thing, that says name. Then let's see if I grab this one in a div as well. And let's see if that has, kind of want each of those fields to be on its own line and also have a title on it. The overall goal of what I'm going to make with this app that's got Forms and Blazor is it will be a presentation that I'll be presenting at our next Melbourne Meetup on Intro to Xamarin Forms Intro to Blazor for Xamarin Forms developers. Because that's kind of the position I'm in, and it sounds like the same position Donald's in, of we're good at Forms, but we want to learn Blazor. So part of what I struggle with in Blazor at the moment is how to turn something with just a few fields on the page into like laying it out in a grid, making it look a bit nicer. And that's something I'll be learning over the next few weeks, and will end up in a presentation. And then after that, what I'll be doing is from then on, each month, whenever someone does a presentation at our meetup, the following week, I will implement that feature. Now, that could be a bit scary depending on what the presentation is. Oh, here we go. That's come up nicely. So, still kind of ugly, but we've split it out into multiple lines now. Our last presentation we did at the meetup was on deferred linking and deep linking, and that all seemed a bit scary, so I'm glad we've already done that presentation, and it'll be a while before I have to implement that in our app. Now let's make it so that the submit actually does something. At the moment it does save, but in our vm.save it just returns. Let's put some validation in here and say that all of them have to have something. If name, if string dot is null or white space. Hang on. Valid equals false. If our name is blank, say validation message equals please enter a name, generate a property, good. We'll start with valid equals true, and there's no reason to make that a bool. We can go with a var, and then if any of these fails, we'll say valid equals false, and alright, cool. And we'll make each of these else ifs. This isn't going to be the nicest validation in that it's just going to give one error message for the whole page. But what's nice about writing this validation in the view model is that all this code will run in my mobile app and in the Blazor page. Return valid, and if going to do data store dot so the way we set up this page, we might be editing an existing item or we might be creating a new item. So if the item is null, that means it's a new one. And the way the data store has been set up in the template, there's either an add or update, there's not just a save. So we need to make that decision here. So we're saying if everything they've entered is valid, and if item equals null, item equals a new item, with a name, description equals description, URL equals URL, await data store dot add item, and that returns true. Capital I. Let's say that's success. Let's make this return valid and success, so it'll only return true if it's successfully saved it and it's also valid. Let's take that up there. That means it saved it, or if it was an existing item, which we haven't quite got a way of bringing them in yet, but we'll be doing that soon using some URL navigation, then we'll also need to save that. Description. Name is the last one. Let's keep the orders consistent. And now we'll do the same again. Success equals wait. Data store dot update, which returns a bool. We still need to give it the item. And let's just say if it did fail to save, we should tell the user how. Say validation message equals failed to add new item. Failed to update item. So now when it runs this save method, whether it's on Blazor or mobile, we'll end up with either it succeeding and it navigates back, or a message telling them why. We've only done that in the view model so far. We also need to do that in the Razor detail page. Let's above the form add in a p tag that says @em dot validation message. So that should be nothing on first load, but I think it's okay with showing a null there. Ah, Kim's just said if not success. I messed something up somewhere, I take it. Aha! If not success. If not success. Thank you for picking up on that, Kim. Cool, cool. And we've got our validation message. Let's see if it runs. Let's start at this page, add a presenter. Lachlan, test, but let's not give an image URL. Please enter an image URL. Let's find my picture. I think I want a new Twitter picture. This is a bit old. And a bit daggy. But I'm a bit daggy, so that's alright. Ah, that's right, we were testing that in our Blazor. Cool. It seems to say it worked, but I'm not seeing anything, not seeing the new Lachlan in this test. So there was already a Lachlan there, but hasn't added anything. If I do a refresh, that's gone. Now, my kind of first guess as to what's going on here is because my mock data store, it's just using an in-memory list of items. We might be getting a brand new one of these each time, or perhaps our add and update aren't working properly. With the current version of Blazor, or how I've got it set up anyway, we don't have debugging. What I can do though, because most of that code that matters is in our shared code, let's find out, does it work correctly on iOS? And that way, if the error was in our view model or our model, we can debug on iOS. If we fix it there, we fix it in both. So that was new item page. Ooh. We've got a special guest about to come onto the stream. This is Ariel. She's very helpful when I'm programming. Ariel, say hello to everybody. There we go, we can just keep an eye on Ariel. And I'll keep working. Come out. You may recognize Oreo from Kim's Twitch picture. Not Twitch, Twitter. Ooh, what are you breaking? There she is. That's Oreo and my little monkey watching Kim on Twitch. Now, if we're going to test that same view model, we're going to need to put the same features into our new item XAML. Most of it's already there, but we change that to item name. And so we've got name, description. Yep, and we'll add in another entry for the image URL. I'm not using the previewer. item page currently sets binding context to this. I don't like that. I like to set my binding contexts in my XAML. So if we say binding context, we say a VM colon item detail view model. Gonna give it a name of VM and import the namespace. Now we'll be able to get to our view model. And in our code behind, instead of sending a message to save item, we're going to call vm.save. Bye, Ariel. Wait, vm.save. Oh, let's see that. Wait, vm.save. And if success, pop. And that one just does it straight away. Cool. Now vm.save is all the same code. Validation message. Now in our Blazor, there's no real concept of property changed. It's just assumed that after anything, it basically re-renders the whole page. It's surprisingly quick, given it doesn't know how to. It doesn't get notified of which thing to do it with. But in our Xamarin forms, we do use notify property changed. Now, my preferred way to do that is have a private string as a backing field. Now getter will return validation message, and then I like to use the set property from MVVM helpers. We give it a backing store, which is a reference to that backing validation message, and we give it a value. Now that one line there is exactly the same as validation message equals value on property changed name of validation message, but I can do it all in one line that's a bit shorter. That's how I like to do it, and it's a bit easier to read, I think. Some people like to use body. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. Keeping this app, I think there's enough going on in this app without adding another black box. That validation message is there now, which means in our new item page, in our stack layout, let's also add a label. Text equals binding validation. Yes. Do I have that in my clipboard? Nope. Was it just validation message? I think so. Item detail view model. Yep, validation message. Okay, now that Oreo's gone, I'll point that back up at me again. And what we've done should have it lined up now, so we've got the same functionality in both, so we can debug that. But my item detail view model doesn't have a null argument constructor, which was fine in my Blazor because I explicitly just said item detail view model is a new view model and passed it nothing. has that default, but in Xamarin Forms, when it's being created in the XAML, the way it uses reflection, it likes to have an empty constructor, and just having an overload that's the same isn't good enough. So this is the equivalent of if an item was null, which means we no longer need to allow item to be null, because if there is one, there is one. So we've got our 6 presenters there. We click add. Let's add Oreo button in. I need to change that. From text to image URL. But I won't save it yet because this is fine. Whatever, give it a real URL later. When I hit save, now we're debugging. Should pass all our validation tests. Ah, that only validated one of them. That's not right. Fix that issue later. Now we've said, we got valid equals false for that. Please enter a name. String is null or white space. Name. Is that binding correctly? We've got an entry that binds to I'm changing that, not using items here. And we said that in the view model, if any of these fail, I'm not going to bother checking the rest. Probably means setting that is kind of pointless, but that's fine for now. Oreo button. Cool, we saved. We pass all validation. Item is a new item, that's correct. And step in here. Let's see if a step in is going to work today. No, that's gone into the task. Let's check out our mock data store. Add item, put a breakpoint there. Items had 6 items, now items has 7. But in our items view model, load items, if I do a refresh, we've only got 6 back. It hasn't got the new one because each time we're just getting a new instance of that same one. Because here we're saying new every time instead of what it originally said, which was the dependency version. what we really should do is wire up dependency injection, but I think I'll leave that for another stream and just chuck in a sneaky dirty hack for now. And make this list static. Don't tell anyone. Oh no, that's not what I meant to make static. There we go, now the collection it works with will always be the same. Static field cannot be assigned to except in a static constructor on a variable initializer. Let's make it always be the same thing. And instead of putting that all in a constructor, let's put in a method called seed data. Generate a method. There it is. Let's say items. Items dot add range new items. So we still just got those 6. Now when we add REO button, that saves it. There we go. We've got an issue there that when we refreshed, it added them all twice. We do another refresh. That's a bug to fix, but our new value is there, which is good. Let's fix that seed data method in our data store to only add them if there are none. If items dot any return, so we don't keep on building on that list. Cool. That'll fix that. Now let's check it in Blazor as well. Now it is still just using an in-memory list, which means every time we start and stop the app or change between platforms, that's all blank. On another stream, I'll connect this up to a database behind it. Do a refresh of this. Add a presenter. Ariel. And there she is. Alright, I'm gonna wrap it up there. We've got a good bit of functionality in, and we can see kind of how easy it is to fix a bug on one platform and fix it on both automatically, and also things like adding an image URL. You put it on one and you can share that as well. So we're in a pretty good position to build out features on the app. Yes. Donald's just asked for the repo URL. I'll just quickly commit this. Let's see, we added creating new items. Over on GitHub. If we do a refresh of that, there's our README. Not much code yet, because hang on. Here's the repo URL. Oops. I might end up changing this URL. I might be renaming the app, but whatever it is, I'll leave this URL intact and have a link to the new one. And it'll definitely still be in github.com/Lachlan. So far, we've only got up to there in master, but let's do a pull request for everything we've done today. Stream 1 feature, pair and pull request into master. Able to merge, create pull request. Ideally, we'll get to a point where we've got unit tests and continuous integration and stuff set up on this, but only so much can be done in one stream. Merge pull request, confirm merge. That's all on master now. So when we go back and look at here, we have got our Blazor project. And if I do a fetch, and we're done. Everything's in master. Cool. I'm gonna wrap it up there. Anyone got any questions? Or anything cool they've been working on that they want to plug?
Sweet
Cool.
victory.
Thanks for coming by, Kim. Thank you, Donald. Thank you, Rod. And then I think we also had David earlier on and a few other users in the chat. Thank you, everyone. I'll be streaming same time next week. Kind of keeping on working on this same app. Mainly next week, want to get feature complete of everything that I will have in the presentation for both Xamarin Forms and for Blazor. And then the following week, I'm going to really focus on getting that Blazor UI a bit nicer and thinking about things about kind of doing a bit of layout and that sort of stuff in Blazor, which I'll have to learn before then. Okay, thanks everyone. Goodbye. I don't know how to do a raid yet. Maybe I'll learn that by next week as well. But that's all for today. Bye.